Hey, dear saints, thanks for joining us for our first episode of Getting Sidetracked with Pastor Clemmer. And the basic idea of this is the side ideas that I have that I want to talk about in Bible study that I just didn't have time to talk about, or maybe it was going to get me too distracted, or maybe there's a part of the Bible verse some of the Bible verses from the previous Sunday or the upcoming Sunday that we're not going to be able to treat as thoroughly in the sermons or in Bible class. I want to unfold that a little bit more here. Try to keep this relatively quick, and sometimes perhaps it's just me thinking out loud. But the thing I want to talk about today briefly is as we find ourselves in the context of this election cycle, really less than a month out now, and we're certainly feeling the heightened level of tension in the country between certainly two political parties. But I want to get behind that notion a little bit and really think about the philosophies that are driving the driving the tension or driving the animosity or the frustrations on both sides. And this is certainly not my idea, but it's a helpful way for me to think through one of the key differences in America. It's this distinction we want to draw between what's called progressivism, or a progressive way of thinking, versus a conservative way of thinking. And the problem here is that even built into the word conservative built into the word progressive is the word progress. And who is against progress, right? So to say that you're not progressive in your thinking suggests that you're like reverse, almost devolving, that you want to go back and be Amish and do away with electricity. That's silly. It's simply historically inaccurate as well. So very briefly, if you learn nothing here except for this point, it's the concept of progressivism goes hand in hand with evolutionary thinking. And here's why. When you think about what evolution is, the basic premise of evolution coming out of the late 18th, 19th centuries is this concept of, obviously, that we weren't created by God, but we have evolved as organisms developed over millions and millions of years. There's this evolutionary process as things continually get better and better. So to use an easy example, maybe you have like a tadpole or some kind of a fish that has a really effective fin on the back, and because it had the fin deformation, it actually allowed it to swim faster, so it was able to eat more, procreate more, and survive longer. And because it procreated more and could therefore, or it survived longer and can procreate more, that meant that there's more of that genetic code in the next generation down of fish, right? They all have the special fin, or more of them have the special fin that makes them faster. So as species evolve, it's those characteristics that benefit the species that lead on into the next generation. And therefore, every subsequent generation that follows is necessarily better than the preceding one because it evolved, or you could say it progressed. Okay, so you see how the evolutionary mindset would be that there's a struggle. This actually comes out of Hegel. It's called the Hegelian dialectic, if you're familiar with that philosophy. But that there's a struggle, which in the evolutionary case would be this tension between the particular animal in the species that has the better fin, or the longer neck, to look at giraffes or something, some kind of a physical difference that would give it an advantage, making it the survival of the fittest, right? So it allows it to survive longer. So there's a tension between the species. The weaker die and the stronger survive. And arguably, notice, the stronger have to defeat the weaker. The weaker have to die in order for the species to evolve. And if the older species are holding on and not dying off, then really they're holding back the species from getting better and better. And so as history progresses on, not just with species evolution, but all of history itself, with mankind moving forward to be progressive in their thinking, it's this idea that the way we view the world, our philosophies, our standards of right and wrong, good and evil, truth and false, those concepts don't come to us from a God who is outside of our universe, but rather it's constructed by us in our experiences in this world. And the longer that we're around, the smarter we get, and the better that we're realizing, you know what, this isn't a very good way to live. This isn't a very good way to treat people. So we evolve in our thinking, and so it progresses forward. So we call it progressive, the progressive mindset. Not all of that's bad, because certainly there's things within humanity that we look back in former cultures and say that wasn't a very good way to treat people. We could even say that it was a wrong way to treat people. But to be fair, especially from a Christian worldview, we could say that even then they could have known it was wrong. If they could have looked at the Bible, where the Lord has given us clear truth, they would have known it was wrong to treat people like in the case of like slavery in America. It's wrong to treat people like that, as to abuse them in that way, to treat them as personal property, to not treat them as equals and as humans created by God that need to be valued and respected. So it's not that progressivism made that wrong. Rather, Christians should have known better, and many arguably at the time did. And there were certainly arguments made coming from Christianity, trying to fight against slavery. And that's certainly a hot button issue today with all of the tension surrounding racism in the country as well. So in our mind, we want to realize that the fighting that's happening in the country is not between just people not getting along, and they hold their opinion. And we're fighting just because we like fighting. The deeper, obviously, it's silly. Really, behind it is everyone knows what's at stake. So the progressives are saying we're trying to progress the species. We're trying to evolve and get better and better. And if you're not coming along with us in the new definitions of sexuality and the new definitions of when life begins, or what personal property is and who defines that, if you're not progressing along with us, you're necessarily holding back the species from evolving. You're the problem. It would be like you arguing that we shouldn't have electricity. You're wanting us to go back in time and be regressive. We're trying to be progressive, so we're positive. Well, so that's why they're so aggressive in that thinking. And on the other side, the conservatives, who have something worth conserving, that is something worth passing on to the next generation, preserving it from previous generations because it's valuable. Those of us within Christianity, we're conserving these ideals, or not even ideals, but these truths that are given to us by the Lord through Scripture. So He reveals Himself to us. He created us. He made institutions in this world, institutions like marriage, like personal property, like life is given to us. Family is given to us, established for us. A concept of right and wrong, good and evil. These are given to us by the Lord. Those are unchanging. He defines them and He gives them to us. And so we conserve them, and we carefully protect them, and we pass them along to the next generation. We teach our children. Not because it's better, we would argue it is better, but that's not because we pass it down, or that's not why we pass it down. We pass it down because it's true. God has revealed it to us, and so it's objectively true from anything, because we might disagree at certain points in our lives perhaps, but we know truth according to God's revealing it to us and instituting it in this world. And so here you got the Christian mind holding on to a truth, and the progressive mind saying there is no objectivity. There's no God who's revealing Himself to us, but rather we're just evolving in our thinking. And so you get these two things that really are inimical. They can't exist together, because one is trying to necessarily change the other. Or really, I'd say one's trying to hold tight and the other one's trying to change it, and this one's saying no, so it creates a tension. We get that in our country. So for the Christian who calls himself a biblical conservative, that is, we get our norms, our values of truth from the Lord objectively, and we're conserving those. Now, this is a little bit different as it enters the political realm, because in the political arena, there's also progressives when it comes to the Constitution. So we don't want to confuse ourselves on, like, to be American is to be Christian. I mean, that's certainly not the case. Christianity was around long before America, and will be around long after, as long as the Lord doesn't come back. But the concept's still the same, in the sense that a progressive, when it comes to the Constitution, is saying we should look at the Constitution and see as a living document that changes over time. As society changes, and as the preferences and the tolerances of a society change, the Constitution should be reinterpreted to fit the times. And so it's not a solid document that says this is who we are and it's unchanging truth. And then even though society might want to change, good and evil is still set here. And as we change, it's still saying that's wrong. You can't do that, right? So when it comes to like some of the political debates today, you've got the constitutional conservatives who are trying to hold tight on the Constitution because it's true and it's who we are and it's our American identity. And the progressives who are saying it needs to be a living doctrine, living document that changes. Okay, and that's been around for over 100 years now. That way of thinking about the Constitution, but it's parallel to the political or the biblical conversation, the theological conversation with regard to the Bible. Is the Bible a solid thing that's revealed by God that doesn't change because the society changes? Or is it a living document that can be reinterpreted to fit the times? So yes, it was unloving to treat people a certain way in the Old Testament or in the times of Jesus. But today, it's more tolerable to define marriage in a different way, right? Or to be more accepting of a person killing a baby in the womb or something when it comes to abortion. That's acceptable today. And so Christianity can just change what it determines to be good and evil, right and wrong, to accommodate the culture. Well, so you see the same parallel argument in politics when it comes to the Constitution. That's not to say that they're equal or that one necessarily affects the other arena, but it's interesting. There are some overlaps because when it comes to issues of life, personal property, those issues are key for the Christian because, for example, we say that we're arguing that the Lord has instituted marriage and it's unchanging. And the Constitution can't redefine marriage because even the Constitution talks about, or it doesn't give rights that weren't there at the time of the Constitution. So you can't like read the Constitution today and make up things. It's called anachronism. You can't make up things that weren't around at the time. Same with personal property. So we would say from a Christian perspective that the seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal, gives us the right to personal property, and that can't be changed. If the government wants to take my stuff, they can do that, but all of a sudden it becomes stealing, right? Because at a certain point, they're taking my stuff against my will. Even if the government says it's okay, it still conflicts with Christianity. So that's maybe we'll do that for another sidetrack because I'm getting sidetracked on my sidetrack about socialism. So in any case, so that's the basic idea today is this tension between progressivism on the one hand, I guess I use the progressivism over here versus conservatism, and we see the overlap within Christianity as well as in the political arena. Now, what do we do about it? It's helpful to understand the conversation and see the tension. And now we know I'm not going to argue that person into believing with me by just getting aggressive with them, right? They have a different perspective, and if they think we should be progressive in our thinking, going back to the theological progressive, if we should be progressive when it comes to good and evil and truth. And now we're arguing really, is the Bible trustworthy? Is it true? Is there a God? So that's really where the argument is. So it's not about whether or not we should define marriage in a particular way, because ultimately, if there's no God revealing marriage to us and the Bible is not reliable, well, then it changes the the huge hinge, the foundation of our argument is that God has revealed His truth to us. That's one piece of it. But there's also plenty of atheists who would also assert that marriage is what marriage is, from a man and a woman producing children. Otherwise, society collapses. And if they're not able to produce children, then it's not really a family, because that's what all of history has always determined a family to be. And that's what continues a culture. If you cease to have a husband and wife producing children, then a society will end, right? So there are arguments to be made specifically about marriage from a non-biblical perspective. But we also want to remember as Christians that we're getting our definition from the scriptures. And at the end of the day, even if a person agrees with us on a definition of marriage or when life begins or what personal property is, if they don't believe in Jesus, it does them no good. So we don't want to get too distracted by these laws, except for the fact of loving our neighbor. So for the sake of society, our children's generation, for the sake of the babies in the womb and so forth, we want to defend these things, these truths. But also we want to be mindful that we don't want to overemphasize those things to the extent that we diminish the gospel. So we always want to make sure that Christ is really the goal in these conversations. We want people to believe in the Bible, or to believe in God through the Bible, so they know Christ as their Savior. And but as we navigate these conversations, it's helpful to know where they're coming from and why they're thinking a certain way, and it helps us kind of peel back the layers of their arguments. Hopefully keep more calm ourselves and actually help steer them back toward a truth. Finally, the truth has to be revealed. Otherwise, it's always going to be this changing target. Maybe we'll talk more about that in another episode. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Sidetracked, and we'll see you next time. God bless.